It's off of Washington Street on Road to Route 5. Make a right, I suppose, onto Washington, and the second street's right there, 21 East, Cafe, Library, and Adult Literacy, Friday, December, whatever it is, 9, I guess.
Good Irish duet, doing the job. Okay, thanks a lot. A lot of things happening around here. We got a special guest, Jess Goodell, daughter of Andy Goodell, our assemblyman, who's come all the way from Buffalo, New York, to be with us to share some of her experiences. She is in the Marines. Are you still in the Marines?
No.
No, she was in the Marines at the time. And she went over to Iraq, and they said, well, we have all the mechanics used up. There's nothing. We have this one position no one seems to want to take, and that is in the mortuary services, the preparation of the dead to go home. She said, well, if that's all there is, I guess I'm stuck. And here you are, right? How long were you there? Well, first of all, tell us a little about background. Where were you raised, and where did you grow up?
I'm originally from Bemis Point, and I went to Maple Grove.
Can you hear her, John? Or anybody? Try again.
All right, well, I'm originally from Bemis Point, and I went to Maple Grove, and I graduated in 2001, and in August of 2001, I enlisted in the Marine Corps, and so I was in from 2001 to 2005.
Okay, and that was a 4-year term, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a standard stint. You didn't extend?
Correct.
Enough. You've had enough? And so now, what happened when you got over, when you did enroll in the Marines? You went through basic training, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you do that?
Yep, I went to boot camp in Parris Island.
Parris Island.
And from Parris Island, we do Marine Corps combat training. Mm-hmm. And from there, then we go to our specialty school.
Which is kind of interesting because at that time, they had a policy women were not allowed into combat situations, as I recall. Today, it's still the rule, but they do sneak in one way or another.
Well, I think the nature of Iraq is slightly different than the nature of wars past.
And what way?
In that there isn't a specific combat boundary line. Combat is just all around.
Everywhere, excepting maybe the green zone. Maybe there's a little safety there.
Right.
That's the center, which they just turned over to the Iraqis. I can't imagine how long they're going to last with the craziness going on over there. Well, the minute we leave, but time will tell, ladies and gentlemen. I still remember the evacuation of the embassy in Vietnam, the final minutes of the Vietnam War before we ran away. Well, Jessica, so you join up, and again, as I pointed out, you had to pick a role, some kind of job, right?
Yes.
And so what was the situation?
Well, the situation was that the recruiter came into the high school to talk to the young men about joining the military, and I said, "What about the young women?" And so I went with the recruiter to the recruiting office, and I kind of made up my mind at that point that I wanted to do what the men did. And so I decided to pick the most masculine job I could, and that happened to be a heavy equipment diesel mechanic. So that's what I went in as.
You went in as a diesel mechanic. Of course, they'll offer you anything you want until the crunch, and then the crunch comes, right?
Well,
you didn't wind up a diesel mechanic, I'm sure.
Well, I was a diesel mechanic for a couple years.
A couple years, okay.
And then I ended up going as a different job.
Okay, what's the matter? You changed the wrong spark plugs or something?
No, we were in formation, and I was in Okinawa, Japan during 2003, and that was when the Marine Corps did their initial invasion of the Operation Iraqi Freedom invasion. When I came stateside at the end of 2003, the platoon that I had entered into had just gotten back from that invasion, and I wanted to go to Iraq. I felt pressure from other Marines, but also from myself, that in order to be a real Marine, I needed to go overseas.
Real Marines have to be in a real combat situation.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And so we were in formation one day, and the platoon sergeant came over and said they already have all the mechanics that they need, so if you want to go over, you need to volunteer for a different position. And the first position that came up was mortuary affairs, and so my hand shot in the air.
So mortuary service, you just said, well, all right, that gets me to Vietnam, right? And so you get to Vietnam. What's it like over there?
It was really unknown. we didn't really know what to expect. I mean, you know, to an extent, but the knowledge, the textbook knowledge that you have is not, it doesn't prepare you for the actual experience of it. And so it was really a learning experience, just being there in itself.
A learning experience, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Especially since you don't know from minute to minute whether you're going to get shot. It's not like the real wars, I mean the old wars where you were safe when you were back a few hundred feet beyond the lines, you were safe. Not here, you're never safe, are you?
Correct.
You're always on edge.
Correct.
And it's hot, isn't it?
It was very hot.
Very hot. And you have to wear heavy uniforms and all kinds of stuff. How much weight do you carry around on those when you're on patrol or whatever?
I guess it varies between 20 to 40 pounds.
Dragging around 40 pounds, 120-degree temperatures with a huge pack and all the clothing you wear. Thank God, it's horrible when you think about it. We got guys still doing that over there, but they're about to get out, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the next thing, what happens? Do they lead you over to the mortuary and say, here you go? What happened?
Well, the unique thing about Iraq is that with the Mortuary Affairs Platoon is that it was all volunteers. And so we had kind of a conglomeration of Marines from all different jobs. So we had Marines that were cooks, that were motor T drivers. I was a mechanic. We had people that were in supply, that were, at the time it was called NBC, Nuclear Biological Chemical Marines. So different Marines from all different jobs came together, and we trained for a couple weeks in Camp Pendleton for the job before we went over.
So actually you had a conglomerate there then, all people. What are the rest of the Marines, how do they treat you when they find out you're in the mortuary, so dealing with death all the time?
When we were in Iraq, our platoon really kept together. We were really a close-knit platoon.
Considered yourself maybe oddballs or something different from the rest, right?
Right. We had a job that was different.
Very different, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it served us well staying together, being so close-knit. But it also, in a way, kind of protected the other Marines, because really we represented a real threat that at any day,
you may be cleaning them up.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're now in the. Do they have one central mortuary? Incidentally, for a long time they wouldn't let the press into the mortuaries or the hospitals because they didn't want them to count. Basically, and the same with Dover when they brought in the bodies. And this is the seamy side of a war, but the real side of the war that they tend to gloss over is that a lot of people get killed in this war, and. You're in charge of cleaning up the mess, as I recall, right? So where is this mortuary? What's it look like?
Well, in Iraq, when I was there was 2 mortuary affairs bunkers. So I was at one, and then there was another in a different part of the country. But basically what it was is that it was a huge bunker that was on an airfield, and so it was actually used to house airplanes. So it was actually very large inside. And when we got there, it wasn't established at all. It was empty. And so we ran the electrical wiring. We set up the lights. We had generators because we had reefers where we would keep the remains until they flew to Dover Air Force Base. Yeah. And so we needed to keep those cool. And so we set up shop, once we got there.
So you basically had to build your own mortuary, really. I mean, you had to set it up.
Yep.
And so once it's operating, what happens?
Well, they trained us. They taught us how to do all the paperwork, what we needed to do. They told us what to expect. And I still remember the day that the first body came in, because it's just different. It's not something that you expect. And I remember when the remains came in, several of us just kind of froze, just kind of took a second, and it kind of hit us what was about to happen. And our officer said, all right, let's get to it. And, but we kind of needed that snap into the reality of the situation.
Yeah, it's not a nice job. I mean, let's face it. I've been an EMT and on the emergency service for a long time, and in the fire department, and we see a lot of this. And the first time you do see a body, it shocks you. So, and then, of course, you see some mutilation, terrible situations, and I'm sure you do over there. So how many bodies would be coming in now at a time on average? I know they're a lot more than they're telling us about. They're telling us we've only lost 4,000 or 5,000 over there. They don't include accidents. There's 20 times more accidents than used to be. They don't include somebody who may be shipped off to another hospital and then they get lost behind there. They really aren't a combat death. Suicides are at the highest level in the national history. People just are blowing themselves away because it's so horrible over there. Goes on and on and on. So you're dealing with a train of bodies coming in. What do you have to do now? You just stuff them in a casket, or do you have to clean them up? Do you bomb them? What happened? What do they do over there in the mortuary?
What would happen is we would get a phone call saying that there were Marines down, or servicemen or women down, and we would get into a convoy and go out to the site, and we would, often the military police would accompany us and help us provide security, and we would go in and we would collect the remains. And because of the nature of death in Iraq, a lot of the deaths were as a result of explosions from the IEDs.
What's an IED?
An improvised explosive device. So it's kind of a makeshift.
IED. So they used to take bombs and things and make bombs they bury and hide.
Yeah.
Blows the hell out of anybody who goes over it, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so we would collect the remains and put them back in our vehicles and convoy back to the bunker. And then it was once we were at the bunker, then that's when we would start to process the remains. And so that involved a couple of things. Some of it involved identification, marking down any identifying marks, any tattoos, wounds, scars, anything that could be used. Another piece of the paperwork that we would fill out would be an inventory. So we would inventory all of the gear, all of the equipment that was on the Marine. And that included anything that was in the pockets, anything that was in their wallets, marking down everything and documenting it so that the families back home would have everything that we had in our possession. And then the other part of that was sorting, trying to sort out remains to make sure that each family got the remains of their loved one specifically. And that's really difficult to do. You know, as a matter of piecing together parts and trying to make wholes to send home.
Right. I bet you found a lot of interesting things in the pockets.
Yeah.
Pictures, probably, among other family, and final letters. Any write a final letter? Some of them do, I know.
Unfortunately, we found several things in the pockets. A lot of the pictures, sometimes it was pictures of people. You know, I remember specifically a picture of, he looked like he was maybe a high school senior leaning against an '83 Camaro back home. Pictures of military service members with their wives and with their kids. And unfortunately, I remember the day that we found a sonogram in a wallet.
Somebody's having a baby, right? Yeah. Well, that's a sad part about it. We got a couple of calls. You want to take a call?
Sure.
Hey, good morning, caller. Thank you for waiting.
Good morning. As part of your job, do you ever have direct interaction with the family of the deceased?
We were only in charge of sending the remains to Dover Air Force Base, and then Dover would send them remains home. So we wouldn't interact with the American family members.
Right.
But the family members that we would interact with were the Iraqi family members, because we would also process Iraqis. And then we would send out notices in the villages saying that we have an Iraqi, you know, and we would describe them and say, if you're missing your loved one, you can come pick them up, or we would deliver them.
And I have one more question for you. How does this affect, has this changed your opinion of anything involving wars and things like that?
It changed my whole life. It changed my concept of right and wrong and peace and justice and love and forgiveness. it really forced me to really think about the choices that I make in my life.
And what a war is really about.